Are you aware of what really happened to you?
No, I'm not.
Or can you talk about
I can talk about it, but I'm not aware of what really happened to me.
Yeah.
All I know is that I went to a friend's birthday party. I gave a friend a birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
You thought was your friend?
Well, we ain't even gonna touch on that.
Yeah.
I came home like I would normally do.
If that's the term that we're going by, inappropriate relationship, the person is claiming that you had an inappropriate relationship. If that's the thing that we're hanging on to, then baby, you Mr. Walker, you don't even want to waste your time sending me nothing on your fax paper because the relationship was extremely inappropriate.
The room didn't explode when Funky Dineva spoke. It tightened. 1 second, it was jokes, shade, background noise. The next, his voice dropped. His pacing slowed and something heavy settled over the live. People felt it before they understood it. This wasn't commentary. This wasn't a read. This was Funky choosing his words like they could change how an entire story would be remembered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw accusations. That's what made it terrifying. He spoke calmly about treatment, about tone, about moments that never make it to camera but shape everything that follows. And when he brought up Tamar, the chat froze. Not because people disagreed, but because they realized he wasn't guessing. He was recalling. Funky made it clear there's a version of this story fans saw and another version Tamar lived. And those two versions do not match. He talked about power without naming it, control without dramatizing it, patterns without sensational claims. And somehow, that made it hit harder. He said the damage wasn't loud. It was quiet. It lived in timing, in access, in who decided when conversations happened and when they ended. As he spoke, the jokes disappeared. Comments slowed. Screenshots started. People realized this wasn't about one moment. It was about behavior hiding in plain sight. And once Funky laid that out, something shifted permanently. Because if what he was saying was true, then Tamar's reactions, her silence, her tears, even her restraint suddenly meant something very different. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was context. And context has a way of blowing up everything you thought you were. Understood. The shift happened so quietly that some people didn't catch it until it was too late. Funky Dineva didn't announce a reveal. He didn't tease a bombshell. He simply stopped joking. His tone flattened, his pacing slowed, and suddenly the live felt heavier. Like everyone had leaned closer without realizing it. Viewers later said you could feel the moment when he decided to speak carefully instead of loudly. This wasn't shade. This wasn't entertainment. This was Funky, choosing precision over chaos, and that choice alone set off alarms. When Tamar's name came up, the comment section hesitated. Funky didn't say she was right or wrong. He said something far more unsettling. There's a difference between what the public saw and what she experienced. And according to him, that difference explains everything people have been confused about since. He talked about treatment without dramatics, about power without accusations, about patterns that don't look like harm until you've lived inside them. The longer he spoke, the clearer it became that he wasn't speculating. He was recounting, and the realization that he might be pulling from conversations never meant to be public made the room feel claustrophobic. Insiders watching the live later claimed. Funky had already heard pieces of this story long before fans ever noticed something was off. Not details you could turn into headlines, but impressions, discomfort, emotional aftermath. According to one source who claimed to be close to Tamar's circle, there were moments when she felt like she was always reacting, never leading, always waiting for clarity that arrived late or not at all. Funky didn't describe explosive fights or cruel words. He described something quieter. Control of pace. Who texts first? Who disappears? Who decides when something is serious and when it's casual? To outsiders, it looked mutual. To Tamar, it allegedly felt destabilizing. People forget that emotional power doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's exercised by withholding, by delaying, by keeping the other person guessing. Funky's framing landed because it mirrored things Tamar herself had hinted at years before in unrelated interviews. Her tendency to internalize blame, her instinct to wait things out, her habit of choosing peace even when it costs her clarity. Then the first alleged leak started circulating. Screenshots fans claimed came from a private group chat began popping up on Twitter within hours of the live. The messages weren't explicit. That's what made them convincing. Short replies, long delays, vague reassurance followed by silence. One message, allegedly sent by Tamar to a friend, read like a confession without naming names. "I keep thinking if I just calm down, it'll make sense." Another said, "I don't want to push because I don't want him to disappear." No confirmation ever came, but the timing alone sent fans spiraling. People started rewatching old clips, old interviews, moments where Tamar seemed emotional without explanation. Suddenly, those moments didn't feel random. They felt connected. Funky never confirmed the messages, but he didn't dismiss them either. He simply said patterns tell stories long before receipts do. What made this hit harder was Kay's insistence that Tamar wasn't passive. According to him, she tested the space. She tried to set boundaries, but when those boundaries weren't met with the same energy, she adjusted. That detail flipped the narrative. This wasn't confusion. This was adaptation. Insiders claimed there were moments Tamar pulled back not because she didn't care, but because she felt the imbalance too clearly. One alleged recording began circulating in private DMs. Never fully released, described by those who claimed to hear it as Tamar sounding exhausted, not angry. "I'm tired of waiting for conversations to finish," she supposedly said. Whether real or not, the description alone fueled speculation. Fans began to realize that harm doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as constant self-doubt. Am I asking for too much? Am I overreacting? Should I wait longer? Funky's words gave language to something people had felt but never named as the live replay spread. The reaction turned volcanic. Twitter timelines filled with think pieces instead of jokes. Fans split into camps. Some accused Funky of protecting Tamar. Others said he was finally telling the truth no one wanted to hear. Celebrity reactions didn't help. A vague tweet from a reality star about men who control situations by acting unbothered went viral within minutes. Another influencer posted, "Silence isn't guilt, it's exhaustion," and refused to clarify who it was about. Every cryptic post poured gasoline on the fire. Meanwhile, Tamar said nothing. No subtweets, no statements, no live response. And that silence became the loudest part of the story. According to people close to her, Tamar wasn't shocked by the conversation reigniting. She was bracing for it. That detail changed everything. If true, it meant her emotional reaction wasn't surprise, it was recognition. Old dynamics resurfacing under a spotlight she never asked for. Funky hinted at this when he said Tamar knew how narratives get framed once they're out of her hands. Tears become evidence. Silence becomes suspicion. Restraint becomes guilt. And yet, she chose restraint anyway. That choice unsettled fans more than any denial could have. Why wouldn't she defend herself if she had nothing to hide? Funky's answer was simple and devastating. When you've learned that speaking doesn't always bring relief, you stop rushing to explain. You conserve energy. You protect yourself. Then came another alleged insider detail that shifted the temperature again. Sources claimed Tamar anticipated being misread and decided not to fight perception in real time. That strategy, if true, wasn't weakness. It was experience. The internet isn't kind to nuance, and Tamar knew anything she said would be pulled apart. So she stayed still. The conversation online grew darker, more introspective. Fans started sharing their own stories of emotional imbalance of being managed rather than met. The story stopped being just about Tamara and Mendeecees and started feeling uncomfortably familiar to too many people. By the end of this phase, the narrative had transformed. It wasn't about proving a single night or moment. It was about recognizing a pattern and asking whether the public had been demanding clarity from the wrong person. Funky didn't offer a villain. He offered context. And context made the situation impossible to flatten into a simple headline. The tension now sat in an unanswered question. If Tamar's silence was learned protection, what happens if she finally decides to speak? And more importantly, what happens if she never does? The story didn't explode. It coiled tighter, waiting. And everyone watching could feel it. Something bigger was coming. Not louder, but more revealing. The pressure didn't release after the first wave of reactions. It condensed. The kind of tension that doesn't scream but hums under everything. As the days passed, what people noticed most wasn't what Tamar said, but what she refused to do. No tearful live. No defensive interview. No carefully worded post meant to calm the storm. That absence became its own statement, and it drove the internet restless. Fans demanded clarity, critics demanded accountability, and everyone assumed a response was imminent. It never came. Instead, more whispers surfaced. Quieter, but sharper. Alleged insiders claimed conversations were happening off camera, not to manage damage, but to assess trust. Tamar, according to those whispers, wasn't angry. She was tired, and exhaustion changes priorities. When survival becomes the goal, winning the narrative stops mattering. Survival becomes the goal, winning the narrative stops mattering. Then the next alleged leak hit, and this one didn't come as screenshots. It came as descriptions. Multiple people claimed to have heard a short voice note Tamar sent weeks before Funky ever went live. The audio was never released, but those who described it said her voice sounded flat, not emotional. I don't know how to explain this without sounding crazy. She allegedly said, "It's not what he does. It's how small I feel waiting." That line spread like wildfire. Quoted, debated, weaponized. Real or not, it crystallized what Funky had been hinting at all along. The issue wasn't a single action. It was erosion. The slow shrinking that happens when one person controls the tempo and the other keeps adjusting to it. Suddenly, fans weren't asking what happened. They were asking how long it had been happening. Mendeecees' silence only made things worse. No denial, no clarification. No vague post about staying strong. Just quiet. And that quiet was interpreted 1,000 different ways. Some said it was maturity. Others said it was confirmation. The internet doesn't wait for facts when tension is available. Old clips resurfaced, stitched together with dramatic music. Moments where Tamar looked hesitant or overly emotional suddenly reframed as evidence. Reaction channels went into overdrive. Some defended her fiercely, arguing that emotional responses are not confessions. Others accused Funky of narrative engineering. And through it all, Tamar stayed still. That stillness began to look deliberate. According to people close to her, she was watching. Not the loud takes, but the quiet ones. Who spoke with empathy. Who chased clout. Who respected her silence. That information mattered more to her than public opinion ever could. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll mounted. Sources claim Tamar had moments where she almost broke her silence. Drafts written and deleted. Voice notes recorded and unsent. Each time the same question stopped her. Would this actually bring peace or just feed the machine? Funky, for his part, didn't escalate either. No follow-up rant. No doubling down. He let his original words stand, which only gave them more power. People realized he hadn't been trying to expose anyone. He'd been trying to explain something many recognized but couldn't articulate. That realization sparked a different kind of backlash. Not against Tamar or Mendeecees, but against the idea that harm has to be dramatic to be valid. Think pieces multiplied. Therapists weighed in. Survivors shared stories of emotional imbalance that looked invisible from the outside. The narrative widened, and that made it impossible to contain. Then came the most unsettling development of all. A celebrity who had remained neutral posted a cryptic message that many believed was aimed directly at Tamar. "You don't owe the internet your pain," explained neatly. It read, "You owe yourself safety." The post went viral within minutes. Fans took it as confirmation that Tamar's silence was intentional, even strategic. Others accused her circle of deflecting accountability. The divide deepened. Meanwhile, Tamar was reportedly pulling inward, limiting access, shrinking her circle. Family members noticed the change. Less reactivity. More boundaries. Conversations ended sooner. Questions deflected gently but firmly. This wasn't shutdown. It was recalibration. She was deciding in real time what she was willing to carry and what she was done explaining. The final shift came not with a reveal, but with restraint. Weeks passed. The story stopped trending, but it didn't disappear. It settled into something heavier. People stopped asking when Tamar would speak and started asking whether she should. That's when the power dynamic fully flipped. Her silence was no longer being chased. It was being respected. And that respect unnerved those who wanted closure. Because closure requires cooperation, and Tamar was no longer cooperating with expectations she didn't agree to. Observers began to realize that this wasn't about clearing her name or accusing anyone else. It was about refusing to let old dynamics dictate new behavior. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. The unresolved tension now sits in that choice. If Tamar speaks, she risks reopening wounds and inviting interpretation she can't control. If she doesn't, she allows the story to exist without her input. Imperfect and incomplete. Neither option is clean. Both come with cost. And that's what makes this moment so charged. The internet is used to endings, statements, receipts, confessions. This story offers none of that. It offers a pause, a refusal, a boundary drawn quietly and held firmly. Funky didn't deliver a smoking gun. Tamar didn't deliver a rebuttal. What was delivered instead was something far more uncomfortable. The idea that not every story exists for public consumption. And not every silence is an invitation to interrogate, as attention drifts and new scandals take center stage. This one lingers differently. It lingers because it exposed something many recognize in their own lives. The imbalance that doesn't announce itself. The exhaustion that looks like indifference. The silence that isn't hiding guilt, but guarding sanity. Whether Tamar ever chooses to speak remains unknown. What's clear is that she's no longer waiting for permission to protect herself. And that decision, quiet as it is, has already rewritten the narrative more powerfully than any statement ever could. This is where it stops being just a story and starts being a conversation you can't afford to ignore. Because what you just watched isn't the kind of celebrity drama that burns fast and disappears. This is the kind that lingers, that quietly changes how people look at silence, power, and emotional control. And if you're still here, it means something in this hit closer than gossip. It means you felt the tension, the restraint, the unanswered questions that refuse to settle. Don't let this moment pass without leaving your mark on it. Hit the like button now, because every like pushes this conversation further into the light, instead of letting it get buried under noise. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not just a reaction, but what you really think. Does Tamar's silence feel different now? Does Funky's framing change how you see the situation? Or do you think the public is still owed clarity, no matter the cost? This comment section is where the real story keeps unfolding. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're risking missing the moment this shifts again. Because whether Tamar chooses to speak or continues to hold her boundary, the next development won't be loud, it'll be subtle, and those are the moments most people miss. Subscribing means you're locked in when the narrative turns. When a single post, a quiet move, or an unexpected reaction changes everything overnight. This isn't about picking sides. It's about staying present for a story that's still writing itself. Don't wait to catch up later. Be here now to catch up later. Be here now